Hi, welcome to the October 15th meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. I'm the chair. We will have several other members joining us in a few minutes, either in person or on Zoom, but I did want to get the meeting started because we are a tight schedule. First thing I want to do is share my screen. Okay. So just very quickly to go over the agenda, I have not distributed the executive session minutes yet, so we'll just be going over the regular minutes. I do want to hold the vote on the recommendation, which we tabled before. We'll do that in about 10 minutes. You have in your packet some select board briefing slides that I put together, so I want to go over those. And then as far as the report, you have in front of you in the room, and you have it on electronically. Hi, Carl. I'll take roll call in a minute. The report. So we will discuss how and what we want to go over in that report. But let me call the roll. The columns come in. So
Cam Rockwell here.
Simon here.
Rich Feeling here.
Gary Kleiman here.
Paul Bone here, and on Zoom.
Am Hill.
David Ropeik here.
Hey, David.
Hi.
Okay. We have a super quorum. And then schedule the next meeting, et cetera. So, let's get started on the minutes. So we're talking about the minutes of October 1st. This is the main session before we went to executive session. Hopefully you had a chance to look at that. It's just a little over page. Any
Sort of before and after.
before and after, right? Any comments on the minutes?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh.
again, go ahead.
Just as very minor, in the last sentence, it says I indicated my hope that the council will review the entirety of the report. My concern was relevant portions, but to me, there's certain portions that really don't need to be expend the time of the town council for what that's worth. I would say relevant portions, but it's no big deal.
No,
No problem.
And
Do you wanna
because
change-
I'm just mentioning because there may be some constraints on the town council's time or something.
Okay, relevant portions.
what are you making a change there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll make it to relevant portions as
Okay.
opposed to.
Oh, in fact, Megan had a question about that. We can talk about later, what exactly we want town council to look at, the whole report parts of that. We'll come to that. Any further comments?
Move approval with Ms. Hill's amendment.
Second.
Okay, approve as amended. Pam Rockwell.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Paul Bone, aye. Pam Hill.
Aye.
David Rugby.
Aye.
You're there, but you're not visible, so. Okay, minutes are. Oh, there he is, okay. Next. Voter, and I'm waiting for Kurt to come on, but is the vote on the recommendation. Let me put up that that recommendation just to refresh your memory again. You should have it. So, this is what we discussed and approved the wording of. We tabled the vote, but we slated to vote on this tonight. I think one of the reasons why we didn't vote on it because we didn't have the whole report. I am scheduled to brief the select board, and Mary Harper would like to know that the task force has approved the recommendation that I'm going to put before the select board. So this is the wording. Let me just read that again to you, to the record. This is the task force recommendation to the select board. This is the wording that the 2229 Main Street Task Force recommends that the select board move forward on a path towards potential acquisition of the 2229 Main Street property in order to both take advantage of the opportunities for meeting the needs of the town, as well as to fully control the use of the property. The task force recommends that while final remediation is still underway at the site, the select board, one, formally expressed the EPA an interest in potentially acquiring the property. Two, direct town council to enter into negotiations with EPA and DOJ to determine whether terms and conditions regarding financial matters and liability protections that the select board deems favorable to the town can be achieved. And number three, in parallel to the legal negotiations, initiate a multi-site planning process through which the specific uses and cost of development at the 2229 Main Street property can be determined. Any discussion on that? Okay,
Do we need to, mention the state of Massachusetts too? Don't we have to get liability protections from them as well?
you mean you'd like to add state?
Well, I'm wondering whether
Well,
that
I think the legal section in the report
describes
will
that,
trump the recommendation. It really describes,
the details.
well, it describes not only Mass DEP, but other private entities. It's not supposed to cover the range of parties with whom the town will have to negotiate. We may not even know where those parties are.
So it's not worth a mention.
I think it's not going to go at this point. Court Booth has just joined us. Hi, Court.
Apologies.
That's okay. We're about to. I'm waiting for 7:15. We have 5 minutes to kind of noodle on this. I think to your point, I think the legal section in the report is much more specific, and so.
Okay.
This is just really direct counsel to negotiate
Right,
with parties. I do have a feeling that a multi-site planning process will be underway. It probably doesn't need for us to recommend that, but it doesn't hurt to have it in here. So I think this covers the basis. We can just wait until person
and that's,
choices.
there is a plan actually in the town, isn't there, to do multi-site planning because of Peabody and
Yeah, there's a plan around Peabody, there's discussions around MCI, but are these knitted together? I don't know.
There's a
the,
group around MCI.
Yeah, there's a group around
A
MCI.
newer group around Peabody, right?
It's not a group around
Well, I don't
Peabody,
think
there's,
there's a group yet, and then there's the town commissioned a study of its own. Chris probably knows better than me, but the town commissioned an outside study of space needs in basically Cottage Road.
well, there's a facility study, right?
In facilities, yeah.
2020. But I think Maggie gave an update to the select board on multi-land plan, a comprehensive plan, so she started to put together,
yeah,
and I think she
That's
recently.
within the planning department.
Yeah.
Not so much, a town committee, yeah, we'll talk about it when we talk about revisions to the report, but I'm not sure that we need to be recommending both. I think our purview, our scope, we should probably be recommending a follow-on planning process for this site. The town needs to be thinking about these things in the broader context, I don't know.
The select board then would be the ones responsible for deciding which.
Exactly,
details they
I
take
think we
and
should
accept or don't
definitely
accept.
give them that context that, we do, like in several sections, every time there uncertainties come up. We talk about the uncertainties being the multi-planning site nature, but
well, since we just have a minute, so I'm closing my eyes, projecting in the future, so what's gonna happen here? Let's say the select board does accept this recommendation. And, there'll be some planning around this site initiated at some point. But I don't think that planning can occur in isolation,
I agree, I'm just saying, like, in terms of the wording of what we're about to vote on. Do we need to say specifically include the site in a multi-site planning process? Our charge is, should we acquire or not, I feel like we should stay true to what our recommendations, what our charge was. I agree
Yeah,
that it
sure.
needs to be included in a
We,
multi-state plan.
we agreed on this wording, we spent a lot of time on it.
I'm
And
actually really happy with the
The-
idea that we mentioned that it needs to be multi-site and it's up to them to figure out how that happens.
I agree, it's just a recommendation.
I would add the select board going there instantly anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like number two, this doesn't direct them exactly how to do the negotiation, right? It just says, really, it says engage in town council, and number three could say engage in planning. Exactly how they're gonna do that's not up to us.
Right, and I like the wording of number two better in that it says, engaging negotiations with EPA and DOJ and other parties. Like it recognizes that other parties come into play, but it's not specifically saying Mass DEP or Citizens Bank or whatever. It's just saying, engage in negotiations. I think we could have, I'm not gonna argue the point, but I think we could have, done a different formulation where we said, develop a subsequent planning process that considers
Yeah.
this site and other relevant.
The problem of having this sitting out there for weeks is that people can think about it.
Yeah.
But, just to remind everybody, we had gone over this, we said, this is okay. Pam, go ahead. Pam.
No, I think one could wordsmith this more, but if we needed to change number three, you could say participate in a multi-state planning process or something. The initiation seems a bit odd, but you could change one word if, I don't really personally care, but I think you could say participate in. That's the,
I'm going to advocate that we don't change it.
Yeah, I'm sort of,
First of all, this has appeared in, this appears in our minutes. As something we
And the
agreed
meeting
on.
packet was posted.
It appeared,
I wouldn't be wedded to minutes. I mean, we should adopt what's the right wording, but I'm
okay,
yeah,
okay with it.
I guess I like this wording because I think we're basically saying, folks, we've done everything we can looking solely at this site, except for the negotiations, which have to occur. You shouldn't talk anymore about what you're gonna do with this site, separate from what you're gonna do with the others. I mean, if they've already initiated it, it's moot, but I think I like it the way it's worded.
So what is,
Carl,
because this,
Yeah, I mean, in just about every discussion we've had about future planning for the site, we've acknowledged the need for it to be in the context of these other sites, so I think this accurately represents.
it's not incorrect,
What we've talked about, what we feel is the right thing.
It's not
time to do. So,
it's different than what you have in PowerPoint slide, by the way. Initiate a multi-site planning process is different than,
Include the site in.
yeah. I'm fine with either one, I'm just pointing out.
well, this is what we had. Okay,
Hey.
who's there? Kurt, just in time.
Hey, all.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
Paul,
the,
Paul, just one observation, this is, I'm
Yes.
fine with it, I'm fine. But I do agree with Gary, I don't think that we should be, I never want to be burdened by what we said in minutes when we have formal votes coming up. I mean, so just for procedurally going forward, I think that would not be the reason to do something like this, but I.
okay,
no problem.
bad idea. The better reason is we've been over this, we agreed on the wording.
Yet we have different wording in PowerPoint, in the report, and
Well,
we
then
have
I'll-
on the screen.
Well, then I'll correct it, then the proper word correcting would be in the PowerPoint.
Just, we should, on what we're voting on, but yeah,
Do we have any strong opinions that would change wording on here?
this is the wording we're voting on now, what's on the screen.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this
Just
recommendation
what we're
as
voting on the
written.
screen, I think.
Second,
Get the PowerPoint. Okay, those two vote, go around the table. Court Booth,
come around to me.
Pam Rockwell,
Yes.
Carl Simon. Rich Field,
aye,
Gary Clement,
Aye.
Pam Hill,
I,
Kurt Herman,
Aye.
David Ropey,
Aye.
Paul Bohm, I'm aye. And Court Booth,
Aye.
great. It's a major milestone. Thank you. Okay. Vote has been taken. Let me click this off the screen. The next order of business are the slides. So, scheduled to brief the select board. You're all welcome to be there. Now, as far as the select board briefing, I've been to a few of them. And I don't think I'm gonna get through all these slides. I'm gonna probably start them. They will have the slides in advance. Select board members will interrupt me and start asking questions. So this is more of a information package than it is a actual presentation. But assuming that I could go through these, the recommendation needs to be stay on. Initiate this site in a multi-site site. That wording was correct, so. Overall sense of these slides. I tried to keep it pretty high level. The flow here, just the flow here is, this is a recommendation. Why is it conditional? It's conditional because we don't. Certain things will only be known through negotiations, such as best method of acquisition, financial terms, legacy liability protections, ownership costs and obligations, insurance coverage. These are things that are not known, and of course, the use of the site is not known either. But if these can be resolved satisfactorily to the benefit of the town, then this would constitute a good business decision. Now, I have that good business decision because number one, it was in our charge. Number two, Rich wrote a section, but I have heard from some of the task force members that maybe that wording doesn't have to be in there, the business decision.
It was requested in the
In the charge.
in the charge.
And Rich explained why it was good business decision. We haven't fully discussed this section yet, but that's why that's in there. It would constitute a good decision. Could be a good business decision, and the property would be of great and lasting value. If everything can be satisfactorily resolved, that's the if. And I said, sort of conditional, why? Because the optimal timing needs to be determined, as the site won't be available for reuse until 2029, but actions need to be taken in 2025. So that explains the conditional. And let me just go through these, and I'm going to recycle at the beginning. We've addressed the major issues, just very high level what we addressed. I think these are accurate, and we've reached a consensus recommendation. This is actually as a build on the slide. I just want to throw this on here from the possible municipal use and possible private development. I changed the terminology to private development rather than private uses, because I think it is private development, it's private uses as well. It's municipal use and private development, so it's a minor change I made here, and then in the report we can get back to that. And then the last, then I have this, I'm not sure we need to go through this, but I think it should be in writing. What's the rationale for our recommendation? Why have we come up with that? We've determined the important needs of the town. We're confident the site will be remediated, but progress needs to be monitored. The site will be turned over to the owner only after cleanup goals have been met. We've concluded any residual health risks after cleanup was completed will be negligible. The word negligible, David and Kurt, in other risk assessment scenarios, people have pushed back on negligible. Are you okay with that term here? As opposed to something that meets all standards? Are you okay with that, David?
So, just a briefing for the select board, I think it's fine.
I hope we can talk about that.
I'm sorry?
I have a comment on that and another, and I just want to make sure.
Okay, we're gonna get back. I'm just explaining what's in here right now. With town council's assistance, we've identified all the important legal issues that need to be resolved and found that there are suitable pathways for the resolution to the benefit of the town. The pathways. We're confident the town can be responsibly can responsibly become good stewards and managers of the site after taking ownership and have estimated additional costs of development. We're comfortable that the relationship with federal and state agencies can lead to a favorable set of conditions for acquisition. Any of all of that is subject to change here, and then I had the list of next steps that, which I would bet that the select board will want to get to this early on. For budgeting and, other things that are explicit here. So that's why I threw this in here, and I just had an outline of the report. This is what they're gonna see.
That next step is pretty hard to read.
It is hard to read. They're gonna have hard copies of this, so
Okay.
I know, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay,
So I don't know if you want, I mean, I'm very comfortable with the overall level and the overall tone of the presentation. I do have some specific comments like Pam does,
okay.
but I feel like we should talk about them in the context of the report. And then the thing is, it'd be great if you could go back and make the slides consistent with what actually winds up in the report.
The wording.
Well, it's not good wording, like, when we get to next steps, we'll talk about it in the context of the report, but like, there are some next steps that I would offer up differently. And then when we agree on what the next step should be in our recommendations chapter, that would be great if that's what you present to the select board. That's all I'm saying.
You're presenting next week, right?
Yeah, well, I want to go through tonight what is essential to go through tonight. That's why I asked the question, whether people want to talk about tonight, because I don't want to go from section 1 through section
Right.
13, 14. So it's open how we, if you want to table this for the moment and go through the report.
I'd rather not, I think, I'd rather not do that. I'd just soon, I have a couple of comments
Go ahead.
on, I mean, I'm happy to table the business one. I do want to make a couple of comments on this because they course through the business. I understand that the business decision wording is from the select board charge. I find that somewhat distressing actually, because this is not a business. We are a municipality with governmental responsibilities, and many of the things we do are not economically efficient things to do. So I'm sorry that we have to even look through that lens, which is not the lens of government. And that's all I have to say about that the business use problem, which I really do think is unfortunate. I wish we could say something else, but I'll leave that at that. The second comment just goes to the word negligible, which I think is pushing a little too hard, and I would not use that kind of a word. I would use words that I guess more are reflective of what reporting has been done on this, which I have not scrubbed recently, but I don't think it's disingenuous, I think, to call this negligible. It's not. Even from just a legal point of view, if something gets screwed up out there 20 years from now, I don't know. I mean, and I know you're talking about risk, but I would not use that word. And
Well, that's in the context of the health risk. It's not all risk.
I realize that. I realize that. And in the context of the health risk, I think we would do ourselves better service if we don't give anybody an opportunity to get the idea that we're pushing a little too much here. And I think that word doesn't need to be that de minimis. So I would ask people like David and others if there's another way to talk about this, which acknowledges some of the risks that I think, Rue has been careful to present. So I don't know, David, this is your area of expertise, but I just think we don't need to say that.
I
Nor
think we
should-
do need, for the briefing, we do need to put in some context of where things stand with our sense of how risky the site is. We could go back to the standard safe language. We expect at the end of remediation, it will meet all of state and federal health and safety guidelines.
That I prefer that because that's the truth. That's true. Negligible, I don't know.
There's a qualitative and you want to avoid the qualitative. It sounds like a judgment. So we could go to the regulatory language and avoid it if you want.
That's good. The wording you have in the the chapter right now is no unacceptable health risks. It's in the chapter.
Based on
So-
federal and state standards.
Based
Right,
on-
it's unacceptable,
Right.
subjective, like I think you wanna use the actual,
Right.
But
What
it's
is
not
the
a
true
judgment
fact?
of this group.
exact,
Yeah.
what is the true fact? It meets all state and federal health standards.
Okay,
That's that's the way to say it, and I think there's a kind of a responsibility there that speaks loudly and positively for us to do it that way.
yeah,
It's not our judgment, it's a fact.
To me, this kind of thinking fits under the idea of under promise and over deliver. And not put ourselves in a position where it could be claimed with any possible legitimacy that we were over promising.
okay, I will change, I'll get rid of the negligible word, I'll put, I'll substitute that word with probably 5 other words. No wonder, yeah, and I'll reference federal standards, yes.
This might be a biggie, but I don't see these really as a rationale for a recommendation. I think they're, in some ways, they're earlier slide. Talk about the rationale. This is almost like the findings that support our recommendation.
Do you think we need this slide at all?
I think it's a valuable slide, but it's kind of like, we did all this research, we did all this work.
Yeah.
This is what we found that led us, that supported our recommendation.
Well, in this slide, I say, here's what we've addressed, you know,
Right.
and then, so maybe just move that slide up to
Yeah, maybe you don't need
Our
to
fin-
address.
our findings or something.
Yeah.
So if you take we have addressed the major issues slide, and then you add for each of those things, what you said in the rationale for our recommendation on those.
I don't wanna put too many words on this slide,
Okay,
I'd rather just,
oh, I see.
I'd rather kind of flesh this out.
Yeah.
And
I
maybe
think-
the next
I think the
slide.
next slide is more important than the list of what we looked into.
Yeah, okay, so this is really findings, not rationale, okay.
Paul, if you indulge me, can we back up just a moment? Are you going to frame this on Monday night as a preview of our report? Is that how, because often slides like this would accompany the report as a summary way to engage our client. But that's
Yeah,
not what's
so
happening here.
Yeah, so I had asked for an extension on the report,
Mhm.
and Mary said, well, you know, how about briefing the select board, what your recommendation is, what your findings are. That's why I've separated the two. I don't want, you know, there's too much detail in the report. So it's a preview, it's a high level abstract, kind of. It's, yeah,
And what's our response to the question, when will the report land on the select boards?
right now, it's December, before Christmas,
Because they'll probably pose that question,
yeah.
or
I think-
you'll present it before they do.
It's an interesting problem because the budget for the legal things that need to happen that are on the list of next steps in early 2025 has to be written now. The money needs to be figured out in the
Put in
next,
next year's budget.
and
yeah.
before functionally the town meeting warrant closes, for instance.
But I thought
That-
maybe you
that's
said that
partly why
they
we-
were anticipating this.
Yeah, that's partly
That's
why
what we
Paul
asked
was so
them to
insistent we
do.
vote
We asked
tonight,
them to.
rather than in
Yes,
January.
so
We've already voted, so we've already made,
we've
so I
kind of,
think with that,
but we kind of had that discussion.
Yeah.
And Megan was here and she was aware that there has to be some budgeting issues and.
yeah,
I don't think it's a big surprise.
Right.
We don't have to explicitly say that here, because we are saying that direct town council to enter into negotiations.
yeah. Having
They've got to
taken
read-
the vote we've just taken, I think that Megan and Terry know what
Yeah,
is expected.
yeah,
Okay,
but as far as, I think the expectation was that it would be mid-December.
Yeah.
Before the holidays, I want to talk about the timing a little bit later, but, anything else, these are really good comments, anything else that?
So, I mean, I have
Unfortunately.
only 2 or 3 comments on the whole report, but one of them is relevant to this, so I'll bring it up now so that we don't
Okay.
have to delay. But it is this you know, on the next step detail. I really kind of feel like being so, in actually the slide before that, it started with suggestions on multi-site planning. And this distinction between, step 5 and step 6, multi-site planning versus a subsequent. I'm not sure that we necessarily have that many suggestions on multi-site planning. What our report really points to is the need for multi-site planning. Our suggestions are just that, we really need to have a subsequent phase, like this is not the end of the line. We had a planning process in 2018, we have another planning process now. There's really important need to continue planning for this site. I don't want to overstep our charge and overstep our bounds by telling the select board what they need to do with respect to the rest of the town. And I just wonder if we could tone down the multi-site piece. It's in there, it's in the report, and I think it's valuable. Because everywhere we talk about uncertainties, we talk about, well, there are large uncertainties in townwide planning.
And
I just wonder if our recommendations, that's what I'm trying to get to.
So let me,
It's kind of like the risk piece.
yeah, so I'm making this bigger, so. I hear what you're saying, so I didn't know what to put for numbers,
Yeah.
so that, what happens next on the site? What happens next? It's not another reuse committee. Maybe, that's why I said a new committee that's focused on the site should be
Right.
formed, but I'm not.
And are we agreed on that?
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. It's
I
like-
mean, because I actually think maybe just it's time that town staff took over a big part of that, that this.
I feel like we have informed the select board on a wide range of issues. And now I feel like it's up to the select board to decide. I think what we recommend strongly in the report, and I think would stick to, is that there be a subsequent phase of planning for the
Right.
site.
Right.
But what form that takes, I don't know that we need to recommend that it's a specific committee, that they need to form a charge. Maybe they do wanna. What we recommended, do you remember in 2021? Our recommendation was not to form another committee, but rather that the select board could direct it and that they should have a liaison from NRC, they should have a liaison from planning, they should have, and somebody rejected that, so.
Well, but the select board, the reality is, select board delegates that to either a select board member or to another group, so I think another group of some sort is gonna have to be formed. And maybe it's department heads, and maybe it's not, I don't know. Let me just ask, so steps should I take out 5 and 6 here?
Well, I would reword, I mean, I think they should be together, and my suggestion was going to be to reword it to just have one step that is, formulate a new or a subsequent planning process that includes 2229 Main Street.
Okay,
Cause that to me is more closer to the fact of what we're recommending.
this is too specific.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if there's an acquisition committee, I'm not sure if that's needed.
That's a good comment. I'll collapse 5 and 6, get rid of that.
Well, and that's an interesting thing about 7 too, because our charge says to develop a risk communication plan. And we've punted that and said, well, we'll have somebody else do that.
I don't know who does that. We told the select board,
Did our charge say that we had to do that? I thought it was.
Says,
just-
So there's pretty detailed
Yeah.
recommendations on
Chapter.
communication.
Yeah,
I know, I mean, we do have it, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I feel
the
like-
next level is really staff level, it
It's-
seems
yeah.
to me.
Right.
develop a risk communication, a risk education and communication effort focused on the public, including organizing site visits, hosting public forums about risk, co-hosting EPA meetings about progress at the site and written reports. Develop and recommend a protocol for immediate contacts regarding issues at the 2229 Main Street. And that's separate from including the risk communication within the outlined plan that we give them in the.
Hey, Pam, what are you reading from? Pam?
I
What are
am
you
reading
reading?
from the committee
the
charge,
charge.
Yes, I thought,
which
okay, yeah.
is, you have a copy of in the packet.
I
of
know, I
appendix.
just want to make sure there's not some other parallel, Ooh.
But so Pam, just, all right, that's what the charge says. Now, given what we have in the report, what do you think about just changing the first 2 words of step 7 to say town implements risk
Right.
communication
Right.
slash?
Yeah,
That sounds
right,
good.
I think that's
Yeah.
the right wording.
Again, the select board should be the ones in the driver's seat.
Right.
They can decide how to implement. We're just
Yeah.
telling them what needs to happen.
Right.
And I think the same is true of these plans.
That's very good.
Yeah.
So we've given them
That's,
some.
if I may, excuse me, I'm glad Gary's mentioning this, because this is sounding very prescriptive from us, and which, we have no idea, and the select board should be the ones driving this, and I also frankly am concerned about the proliferation of more and more committees, volunteer committees, which I think the town has a plethora of. And so to the extent that we can be vague on that point, I'm all for it.
Okay, and it's very good. 5, 6, and 7 will be changed.
Is 8 also, well, they changed to match 8, I guess.
What, 8?
Well,
Town manager develops the,
Well, we have, if you look at the prior slide, relative to this slide, we've got some problems, I think, because in the prior slide, we're pretty declarative. We've got a plan to manage IC controls. Well, we don't. We're not even at the 60% yet. A plan to have ongoing communications. I'd love to couch that in a less sort of declarative, we're done now. Preliminary or recommended,
Yeah.
because that is in fact the truth.
Right,
These,
right.
we're not asking the select board to up or down on our plan. We're saying, here's what we've done.
Also on the IC,
I think that's, so in the previous slide, I would say a plan, it's really a preliminary plan.
Or a recommended. plan.
Or
Where they should start thinking about it.
or a sample plan. You know, I mean, it's kind of like here's one way you could do it.
Which keeps it in line with the next one, suggestions on multi-site planning. We're not saying, here's your menu.
Right.
You know, we're saying, here are
Yeah, and I would say
suggestions today.
suggestions on subsequent planning rather than multi-site again.
Right.
I'm thinking, I'm just wondering on next steps 8. Since the controls won't be actually finalized in 2025. They're essentially, they're gonna have to finalize the plan in that later time frame.
I'm sorry,
So you say, point 8, town manager develops a site IC management plan and budget. But you're gonna base that on whatever it is, the 60% institutional growth plan.
Well,
Maybe call that a preliminary plan or something,
Yeah.
right?
well, does that even have to happen next year?
Yeah, I know, and maybe it's better to push back,
This top section is like 2025.
right, yeah, I think that, that should wait.
To Cory's point,
Yeah.
we're not gonna have the final plan till
Right, right.
several years.
Yeah.
So,
We know what the elements are, but the details, have to be worked out.
Why,
I mean, we
excuse me,
don't actually implement it till after we acquire the site, so it doesn't seem essential to do that in 2025.
excuse me, if I may, why do we need those dates? I mean, I'm finding the whole thing very prescriptive in a way that, the select board may not be able to deliver or want to. I mean, it kind of straps them in unless they really want it. I think the milestones are great, but the timing, it seems like beyond our reach.
Well,
But
you
sequencing,
have to know.
sequencing is critical, so they
Yeah.
have a rough idea of
So
sequencing.
why don't you put it in that term?
Well-
Here's the sequence of next steps without, with dates only on the ones that make a
The
difference.
2025 actions, okay, so let's look at them, select board considers recommendations, obviously. Letter of interest, that could happen,
I understand you wanna get the PowerPoint done. Can we look at chapter 14 though? Because I feel like all of this, if we
It's the
agree
same
with that. Okay, well, it is the same thing and it's not. I mean, if you look at the way you've structured chapter 14. I feel like we could have, an initial steps section and provide the time frame for those initial steps, because I agree with Court that sequencing matters. And so I think that, you talk about initial steps, follow-on steps, and then at my request, you added longer term steps. But I think that if we were to provide a time frame, like what is the time frame for these initial steps? I think Court's right,
What follows what?
what exactly? And I think that we would find, if we go through these things, that we might actually reorder some of what's in chapter 14. Like, this initial conditions thing, right? Maybe it doesn't need to be done right away, maybe that is more of a follow-on step rather than an initial step. And from that, we build the table, that's my only
I'm
suggestion.
gonna deliberately overstate it, so apologies, I'm not trying to offend anybody.
No,
But we are sort of setting up the select board to look like they're gonna fail on this, because there's no way that they're gonna meet specific dates. I just don't think it's humanly possible to declare how fast other parties are gonna move, for example. That's completely out of our hands.
Okay, let's go to chapter 14.
I mean, I just think if we could all agree on what these steps are in the sequence, I think we.
Yeah,
But on the
I
other.
would, I'd like to reiterate my point. I don't know, I think Court's right about this. We're putting the select board in a box. We don't, I think the dates, except for maybe major elements, should not be in there. And I don't even know if, you know, we may not getting the funding for the council this year. And
Right,
okay, let's say, the chapter 14 doesn't have any dates on it. So let's do this first, and we'll come back to the PowerPoint. So chapter 14 has initial steps, follow-on steps, and longer term steps.
I guess, and do we have to choose an acquisition method as an initial step? It seems like that can be deferred.
So let's do at least one, how do you want to go through this, Gary?
I mean. I think we should look at the initial steps as a group and agree, do we think those are really the initial steps that need to happen? And I don't want to disagree with Pam, but I kind of think that having a rough time frame would be helpful. Like, you know, calling it initial steps roughly over the next year. And then follow-on steps roughly the next, 2 to 3 years. And longer term steps, 3 to 5 years, so that they have a sense of the sequence.
Right.
But I agree, I don't want to put them in a box, like you have to have this done by June of 2025 or you fail.
And it makes the assumption that negotiations are gonna be successful.
Yeah,
And that is actually one thing that I think we ought to actually add to the report, is say very firmly that, we've worked hard on this site. We have a lot of understanding of this site, and we have an understanding of what's out there as far as what could be made possible, as far as the liability and the financial. But if EPA is choosing, because we're so excited about this site to get it, to maybe not give us the best options, if the best thing can't happen, we are going to walk away from it. We need to really say that somewhere.
It's in there.
Do we say that?
It was
Yeah,
pretty clear.
It is.
Okay.
But Pam's making a very good point. I mean, if the implications behind everything are that everything is gonna be hunky-dory for 30 years, I don't know, that's a good caution, and we've just.
If you look at, in the recommendations section, which is 11, it does explicitly, explicitly that the town can always walk away.
I wouldn't mind that on the bottom of the slide that you present to the selectmen about why we're making the
Yeah, but I don't disagree, but it's kind of obvious, I'm saying, yeah.
why conditional, you say why conditional,
Yes,
and
because
the
you have-
answer is because we need to walk away if we don't get it.
Well, but the flip side of it is they have to negotiate things that are acceptable for the town.
Right,
Right.
That's the glass half, right? The glass half of it, you walk away, well, obviously.
Yeah, if the negotiations don't
Okay.
result in conditions favorable to the town, you're not proceeding with that.
I'd like to get back to.
so maybe that's
I'd like to get back to 14, the next steps, because it's important
so,
to converge on this.
right, and so the reason I wanted to come back to 14 or focus on 14 is because you, at my request, have edited the end of it, and what you called longer term steps, you added these 3 things that I think are important to be in next steps. Milestones, suggested next steps, timeframe, chapter 14. I felt like it was really important that we include, parallel to the warrant articles for acquisition, we could also be developing with the planning board, some zoning recommendations. Developing a public communications plan and developing next phase planning process. none of those have been in chapter 14 as recommendations. I think they're important to be there. But actually, I don't think these are all longer term steps that would be 3 to 5 years out.
Okay,
So that's,
so just, let me,
beyond that, I'm happy to.
there are 11 listed things here.
Yeah.
Let's forget for the moment whether they're initial, follow-on, or longer term.
Which,
Are these, let's just look at, are these steps? First one is estimate the legal costs. This is the legal cost that will be incurred from the time the town makes a preliminary decision to pursue acquisition. So this is a budget. They have to do this pretty early.
yeah, I think they've probably already done that, but okay.
I don't know. Communicate with this is the letter of interest. Communicate with EPA and DOJ interest. Choose an acquisition method. I don't think that is an initial step.
Right, but it will need to be done
Yeah.
if
Right, I
we
mean-
proceed with acquisition.
I think we could take these 11 and just rearrange them from
Right.
1 to 11
That's,
in.
okay,
Yeah,
because
so
that's the second, so I wanna make sure that we have the right
Okay.
11.
So then if you wanna make sure that we have the right one, then going back to 1, I would change the wording, rather than estimate the legal costs, I would say. What they need to do is budget the legal costs, like set it aside. That's what they need to do, not estimate. I think they've already done that.
That's a good point.
It's like, get it in the warrant.
Megan hadn't implied that they had already done it at our last meeting.
Exactly, so I think it's, make it happen.
Okay. First one's budget the legal costs. Second is communicate with the EPA.
Yeah.
Choose an acquisition method on advice of town council, that's later, that's not an initial step, right?
Is that part of negotiation though, or is
I'd say
that?
subject to subject to successful
It's
negotiation.
not actually something select board does on advice of council, it's something that happens as.
Well,
part of the
they're eventually gonna have to decide how to proceed with acquisition.
But, I don't know when they could say, okay, we're gonna pursue eminent domain right away. We do that, they sit down with town council, I don't know when that's gonna happen.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, so maybe it's a step, but it comes far after 4.
but I guess
Yeah.
Starts
if,
with the-
if the town council seeks to get the EPA to acquire it on behalf of the town, if that's gonna be a negotiating strategy,
Mm.
then you wouldn't want the town to have already decided to take it by eminent domain.
Okay, so choose an acquisition, that's a step, start to negotiate for liability protections, that's negotiations. And direct town council to provide an exit strategy and reporting mechanisms for an orderly sequence of negotiation milestones. So that's basically design the negotiation.
I mean, that seems like that comes early, yeah.
Yeah, so
Not talking about-
So,
So I-
so wait a second, there were 2 things here in the acquisition method that you have. One is about picking an acquisition method, which I think is down when the town council comes up with a plan, not at this stage, that's part of the town council's plan.
Yeah,
But the part about negotiating first refusal is probably a very good thing to get done quick.
So then we'll know what
That's
kind of
something
time we have.
That's different than acquisition.
By the way, just contextually, a lot of this material,
Wow.
Gordon and I had written as part of the legal document, and I'm glad
Yes.
moved, but just be aware that this was drafted by us.
Yeah,
This is
I
kind of,
moved this, they had a series of next, I moved these legal steps into this section.
who gives you the right of first refusal, because there isn't an
That
order,
is not.
there isn't an order of the
It's
site.
not been made clear to us.
There isn't an order of the site to give you the right of
They would
first
give us
refusal.
a formal assurance. They simply keep telling us it's yours for the asking, but subject to negotiations. Which is pretty imprecise.
I mean, I guess they could
Which
agree
is
to
to
not
Paul's
negotiate
point.
with anyone else,
We should,
but that's not.
But is it something we want as an initial step? Because that is something we would want. I mean, maybe town council will know just to do that. We don't need to put it in here.
What are the no-brainer initial steps of the select board, we would push this. select
Budget the
board to make-
lawyer, hire the lawyer, get advice from the
Okay.
lawyer.
But budgeting, get town council started.
1, 2, and 5. I
One,
would say 1, 2, and 5 are the things that need to happen right away. And 3 and 4, well,
four gets folded into 5.
yeah, 4 is part of 5 and 3.
So is 3.
Well, 3 is a much later step of 5, but you're right.
it may not be, but I think the order is 1, 2, 5,
And
then
3 and 4 are
part of
integrated.
5. They're part of the plan.
yeah, they're part of the plan.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would say that those should happen in 2025.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's gonna take several years for the negotiations to play out. It's gonna be, timing. You can't wait 2 years to start that, but you could.
It seems like three, I mean, you just, isn't really, what you're describing is not what the title is.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
what you're really saying is negotiate protections that the town will be the sole party with which DOJ and EPA are negotiating, not an acquisition effort.
But they may put a time limit on it. They may not wanna, wait forever
Yeah.
to see what's gonna happen to them.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure they'll give it to us, but they might say through January 1st, 28 or something like
Right.
that.
Well, can I throw a little wrinkle in this? Forgive me. Bruce's latest, statement is 2029, correct?
Yeah.
And we would not do a final execution of anything until they had done their final execution on the cleanup, correct?
I don't know.
Well, that's why I wanna test
Yeah.
that assumption. Would we do anything prior to their declaration that remediation has stopped and monitoring has begun?
I mean,
So Swaru is really, we wouldn't purchase until a Swaru, is that what we're recommending?
we might enter an agreement to purchase after the SWAR.
Very true.
Is it-
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Without a signature, it's not an agreement. My point is, when would that signature, if you will?
Well, you might sign that, but
I would think we'd have everything ready, to negotiate financial, we know what we're getting into.
right,
That's the trigger for signing the document, probably. Although.
It's like PNS versus actually selling the
right,
house.
versus the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so you're probably right, they wouldn't sign that till they know exactly that it's turned over. But they probably get everything ready to do that, their final negotiation, so I don't know what to call that, but I don't even know whether we have to call it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an agreement. It's just, it's conditional upon the SWAR being issued, basically.
Right.
I think being more. Not being as, the only word I can think of is prescriptive at this point, is better, just make sure we get the front end completely under their, the budgeting, the lawyer, the initiate negotiations stuff taken care of, but not get too wedded to how this is all gonna work out. I mean, and I hate to say this to you guys, but if Trump wins, having worked for the federal government, I can tell you, we have no idea what's gonna happen.
Well, in general, to the entire planet, but
We're just.
Been many times in this project where the technical stuff is all in place and the contracts take 3 years to negotiate. So that's where literally you're just waiting for the Justice Department to sign and then the buildings come down.
So the purpose of this section, I think, is just to mention some things. This is the to-do list. Okay, we don't have this, and there are a couple of things that to do sooner than other things.
Exactly.
But the rest of it is to-dos. The BFPP, that's something to think about. Liability insurance, certainly something to think
I
about.
don't disagree with you, it's just we're saying that
Well,
this chapter is gonna be read more than anything else, so like taking a little time to make it work right and.
I'm not saying that, I'm just getting back to the beginning, why do we have these next steps?
Oh, yeah.
What's the purpose of this chapter? It's a to-do list
Right.
of important to-dos. To Pam's point, we can't be too prescriptive. But we should say there's a few things they should get going on quickly.
So 2025, we're talking about 3 major things happen. We budget and hire the lawyer.
Yep.
We communicate with EPA our intent and hopefully negotiate as part of that, the first right of refusal. And we direct town council to provide a plan of what the next steps are for negotiations. The
There you go.
follow-on steps are not based on time. They are based on the negotiations being successful.
The pace dictated by all the parties, not by this party.
Right, but in other words, there's not a, this has to happen in this kind of time. here's when, these things are all after the lawyer really says, yeah, you're good.
Well, I would say not so, the things under. Long term,
Yeah,
8,
so,
9, 10, and 11 are things the town wants to control and can control.
so, if we're gonna go that route, then if we're just gonna have initial steps and everything else is follow on, I think that developing the next phase planning process should be one of the initial steps. I think right away, as soon as you engage the lawyer and start doing some, budgeting for the lawyer, directing town council to provide a plan, I think you also should be developing the next phase planning process. The other two, I think, can be follow-on
Okay.
steps whenever it's appropriate.
The follow-on steps that are listed here. Right, bona fide, quotes for liability, plan, do an IC plan. Those are things that we only do if we're gonna go forward with a purchase, right?
Well, I think you have to know you're gonna get liability insurance before you're gonna purchase, so. I mean, you don't do that right away, but you have to make sure you're gonna get insurance before you.
But
execute
beginning the
your-
multi-step process is something that we're still gonna do parallel, because we could plan and maybe it doesn't come through.
Well, to your point, right, I mean, we can always get off the bus at any point,
Right,
but we wanna be prepared for the eventuality if it does work.
So I think,
we should still,
I think there are two, there's initial steps and there's follow-on steps.
Yeah.
I think this third category,
yeah,
it just gets folded in,
I agree.
and they aren't sequential. As long as we have the right, as long as we have
So
the
we're-
right bucket.
Taking off dates on them.
Yeah, take
And-
a,
Well, the chart is a little different than this, but, so we can
Well,
get to.
right, so we'll get to the chart in a minute, but I mean, at least is in terms of this, the follow-on steps. I would change the word develop to implement a public communications plan under whatever it is, 10.
And I would leave it under follow on, not longer term,
Right.
Right, we've got rid of it.
Getting rid of longer term.
It's initial and follow.
because we're gonna light that up before we think we need it.
So
I would just,
so I have initial steps as budget, legal costs and town staff is 1, communicate with EPA, DOJ is 2. Direct town council to provide a plan is 3, and then under that, there's 3A, work with town council about right of first refusal and start to negotiate protections from liability, 3A and 3B.
Now, pushing the timing a little bit, are those initial steps next year?
Yeah,
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 Yeah.
I would say,
Is there a
yeah,
comment for
2025.
2025?
That really is 2025, that we want those.
And the rest are, we're not gonna put any dates on the rest of them.
right, I would say roughly 2025 for initial steps, and then follow-on steps, 6, 7, 8, I'm fine with.
yeah, I would put the implement the public communication plan and develop a next phase planning process. At the top of the following steps, because I do think there are things that have to happen sooner,
Well, Gary was saying the initial
Yeah,
planning process should go into the initial steps.
but we can move, implement public communications plan up as the first follow-on step,
Yeah.
is that what you're recommending?
Yeah.
It's okay with me, I mean, we're not,
Are you making
Yeah,
the change?
I am,
Great.
so I will share this.
Your reference to 2025 is calendar 2025, is that
Yes.
correct?
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
Just-
not fiscal year
Not
2025,
fiscal
yeah.
year,
Let's keep this driving crazy.
Okay,
And you're gonna fix the slide to match what Gary rewrites.
Well, question is, are we gonna put the chart in here? Do I even need that chart? In this section, the table?
I would not put dates. I think it is helpful to say, here are the immediate steps that you should be thinking about. And I don't know whether we need to follow on steps, but I would certainly have the immediate steps.
I think they want to try to look into the future and wrestle with the implications of this, because.
Okay, that's kind of why I'm picking on this chapter. Like, I think chapter 14 is really important. I think this is one of the most important things that we're giving them. So I would include it.
It's their takeaway after they decide to acquire, should they do so, based on the
Yeah.
recommendation, this is where they're gonna go immediately.
Right, honestly, I think you're gonna be saying, we have been thorough, we have researched this, we have this reason, and they're gonna be hearing yada, 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 what do we gotta do? They're gonna be hearing, you voted yes, what do we gotta do?
So let me look at the bottom of this list and work up.
Yeah,
I think, I have this in here, so they need to get some concept about timing. So I think site development initiated not before 2030. That's what we've heard. To your point, town concludes negotiations and acquires the site, probably 2029 after the SWARO was issued.
Forgive me, 20, we make a big deal out of the intention letter so that we can influence site development. So this is a different kind of site development. This is town shovels in the ground, not EPA shovels in the ground. Do we need to qualify it? To make it clear?
Where are you looking at?
Site development initiated in, was, item number 20.
Oh,
Don't ask.
Site development for reuse, it's really reuse.
Well, I don't, let me express it this way. If we have influence on what Bruce does on the property, that is indeed site development.
right, so we could call it,
Town
Town
site
reuse.
development, that's all. I'm getting picky here.
actually, we don't wanna say town though, cause it could be a private party.
Site
Site
reuse
redevelopment.
efforts initiated.
Construction begins,
Well,
Hmm.
there's already construction.
construction could begin.
I'm sorry, are we talking about two different things?
No, we're
No.
talking about the wording.
How to word number 20.
They don't like the wording,
There's-
site development.
All I'm saying, I'm getting picky, though, there's two site developments, one is what's happening now, and we want to see at that table. And then another one, that takes place upon acquisition. Or if you will, EPA shovels now and town shovels later.
What did you say, post-acquisition site development?
Thank you, perfect. Just as a qualifier.
Right.
Number 20 is post-acquisition site development. Okay,
Thank you.
So,
just let me work, I want to see what's needed in here. So these are all follow-on steps. And it's more of a sense of timing. I want to tell them the SWARO is not gonna be issued until maybe the end of 2028.
Parentheses M, help me out.
I'm sorry,
Number 18, SWARO issued by EPA, parentheses M.
I don't know what that means.
Is that what other people are reading?
Should.
Yeah.
It's in the packet.
yeah, you might wanna just get rid of the,
Yeah, okay.
Number 17, I don't know if there needs to be a town meeting or not, that's why there's a question mark there. I had a sense that may not be required, but probably is prudent.
That's what we keep hearing, don't
Well-
have to, but will.
Yeah, and-
I think certainly it would be needed for the zoning at some point, so
There you
maybe
Yeah.
you could say, town meeting. You know,
zoning or acquisition.
yeah, zoning and or acquisition.
And the other thing is it may be that there is some money that has to be put out to settle liens or do something like that.
Right, so we can say and or acquisition.
Well, just put zoning / acquisition.
Yeah. Zoning
It's
slash-
not or.
Right.
So, Paul, I mean, this is, you'll make clear that these are not all next steps for the town, these are the next steps in the process of acquisition and reuse, right? Because you have things here for the EPA.
yeah, this is the timing of next steps. This is called milestone suggested next steps and timeline.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit different than the text. This
Right.
says milestones and timeline
Right.
in it. Especially that bottom section.
Right, and so I'm comfortable that bottom section, calling it a timeline, but you don't want to box them in, if they miss something, but.
So number 10, you'd want to change to, so tell me about 10 and 11, you want to combine those?
Well, I mean,
I mean, it's basically saying, do we even need that in there? This planning's gonna take a few years.
Yeah, I don't think it should be in there. I think it should be up above in the 2025.
Well, it's,
Oh, you've already had,
it's not, this is.
so you're gonna, right, still make those changes we already talked about for five,
But
six.
you're gonna take out the reference to Newcom and
Yeah.
just put town or something.
Number 12, I want them to know that the oversight committee is gonna be continuing to monitor the cleanup during that period.
I would hesitate to keep 13.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, that's a little
with it.
prescriptive.
Let's just get rid of it.
Take out
We have no
13.
idea.
And I
how
think
it's gonna
mid
happen.
2026 is too soon to
Yeah,
know
absolutely,
what you're gonna do with it.
right,
Take out.
you don't know how it's gonna be developed, so.
13 delete.
I also think
You
14,
know, I think
14 is probably not a 2026.
So there's planning, but then the planning, you have to budget. So at some point, they're gonna have to put,
So should that be a
Money for capital
range,
plan.
maybe 2026 to 2028?
yeah, but you know. FinCom is gonna want a 5-year capital plan for this site development. When are they gonna want that? They're gonna want that yesterday, and I keep telling them, we can't do that, but probably starting next year.
Well,
The town should put together a 5-year plan.
alright, so maybe they should be. Yeah, I don't know. I would put it as a range, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think until you have the information about acquisition, the acquisition negotiations, enough to make the acquisition decision, you can't really put together a budget.
I think.
You think you're wrong?
well, you
If Catherine
could get a
goes
budget
through-
for some things, you know.
Okay.
I think they would want that budget. If you don't spend it, you know, you can
Right.
pull that out, but
Okay,
you don't wanna not have it in the plan.
okay.
You want to assume that you're gonna be spending capital money on the plan. If you don't spend it because you can't acquire it, then you pull it out.
But the budget's gonna be dependent on the uses that come out of the multi-site planning process, so it's not gonna be 2016, it's gonna.
No,
start-
there's a range of time. It's probably, you know, 2026 to 2029, it's a period of time.
Yeah,
Site cleanup continues. I want to put that in there just as a line.
yeah,
It's ongoing, 2025 to 2029. Decision on acquisition made, so.
I would put a
It's a
time
little,
frame in too, because we
I
don't
don't
know how
know.
long the negotiations will.
Probably can pull that out,
Yeah,
because we don't know when that's gonna be made.
right,
so delete 16, you're saying?
I would take delete 16, yeah. Although, if you're gonna have a town meeting. we're
yeah,
probably gonna-
I think it's somewhere in that
Yeah, I'll maybe put that in there,
2026 to
Gary, just have a range.
2029 period.
Decision on acquisition made 2026 to 2027.
2020, if we're not expecting the SWARU by EPA, we've signed something at the beginning saying we're interested and negotiations have happened. Then we really don't need to have the town meeting on zoning and acquisition until 2028, right?
Right, but you need to be submitting articles in December of 2027,
Well,
so.
it's just,
Yeah,
I think for some of these, we don't know the exact date, and I think putting
That's it.
in a range is.
we don't know,
is more honest.
it's the to-do, it's the
Right.
to-do list, it's the milestones, it's
Yeah.
gonna happen, we don't know exactly. when.
Should we say 2027-2028?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's getting better and better, you guys. I mean, it's, the more you strip it down, the better off we are, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
that's,
think this is helpful to just. go
and
through
that's
this.
still, the decision on acquisition could be 2026 to 2028, so.
Right, yes,
Sorry to say, yeah, 2026, to 2028, I think we had it at 27. All right,
So you could put it in the range, I mean.
yeah, 2026 to 2028.
And that's the select board's decision, if it still has to go to town meeting because there's some difference of acquisition method or something like that, then you have time for that.
you could also say expected timing or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's good. Hedging is wonderful.
so just the difference between the text here is initial steps and follow-on steps. This chart is more of a milestones and timeline, it's, you know,
Right.
it embeds the other, so they serve two different purposes, I
Yeah.
think,
You're just gonna need some intro text to explain it.
yes.
So So the town concluding the negotiations and the site development initiated, or however we're saying the site development, we're wording that. Those things, it's not that it's 2029 and 2030, it is that it's after the SWA.
Right.
So what number?
19 and 20.
So 19 and 20 should be after.
So there are two different things,
Well, yeah,
including
the
negotiations.
town could
required
conclude
site.
negotiations well before that, and to Court's point, just be waiting,
Right,
you know.
But we don't want to acquire the site until we're sure it's
Right,
ready for
That's
review.
right, they're two
That's what
separate
that is.
things, they're two items,
But you wanna make a decision well before,
right.
so that the land is either on the table or not on the table.
Well, we have
We can
decision
conclude
about
the
this today.
negotiations while we're waiting for the
Yeah, I
SWA.
think, you know, that's what number line 16 is, decision on acquisition
Yeah.
made. Maybe that's not 20, it's 2026, 2027. I think you can put it. And maybe that's all we need, you don't need the 19 is,
No, I think we want to make it clear that we're not going to have to actually finalize the purchase until the SWA is issued, right?
that's
We're
19,
recommending
that's
that.
after the story.
That's the purchase.
Right.
Oh,
Right,
I see.
acquired.
Yeah,
I would
acquired.
just, I would say,
Town acquires,
town acquires the site, if
yeah, town
you.
acquires the site is after the story, yeah.
Right,
I think-
but
So we wanna
if
break
you made a
19 into
decision to
The
acquire,
decision
you've
is
completed
before.
the negotiations.
Right.
And the site development initiated, both of those things, you shouldn't be putting a date, you should be saying after the SWA is.
But actually, the town concluding negotiations and town making a decision on acquisition are the same thing. But the town can't make a
Right,
decision on
right,
acquisition,
yeah,
they
right,
conclude the negotiations,
Exactly.
So the 19 and 16, the first part of 19 and 16 are kind of the same thing.
Right,
Right, and they're happening at the time that we said for the 16 pre-SWA and
So-
acquisition after.
The decision is probably 2026, 2027. The
depending how
acquisition
long the
itself,
negotiations,
the acquisition's not made till 2029.
yeah, you just don't know how long the negotiations.
No, the acquisition is not made until after the SWA.
I just said,
But it's not that it's 2029, you
well, look
can't
at the
say.
car, not,
Oh, sorry.
it's after the SWAR.
Oh,
Yeah, but if we're gonna have town meeting vote, you don't wanna wait for the 2029 town meeting, do that. If there's a deal depending
Right.
on the SWA,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I think you have to
right.
go to town meeting and
Right,
say,
I think
Right,
whether we have a town meeting and whether a vote's needed, is above my pay grade right now.
right.
It's a select board town council decision.
But again, I object
It may
to,
be just a informational meeting without a vote, I don't know. The town already has authorized the select board to acquire the site
Yeah,
in eminent domain. No extra vote is needed. Now, the select board may want to do that, but I don't think it's
So-
needed.
so again, I object to the numbers 2029 and 2030 on numbers 19 and 20. I say it should not say that, it should say after the SWA is issued. Because we're totally dependent on that.
Hey,
And
Pam,
if they take until 2032
Pam.
to do it,
line 18 says SWAR issue, okay?
okay.
Everything is after that. The SWAR isn't issued until 2040. It's not gonna happen, so it's in the right order, you know, I don't know.
I mean, you could put estimated in parentheses after those days too.
maybe you should
You're
have a header in front of the whole thing saying these are guidelines, estimations, just, you might just
Yeah.
orient the reader to the entire thing with, this is, obviously, this is dependent on many variables over which we have no control. Here are suggested, the order that we suggest and the likely, or the estimated timelines. I mean, I would do something like that at the outset.
Yeah, I mean, I think the text that's used to introduce this chart is gonna have to, say that.
So this whole section starts out, so if the select board accepts the recommendation described in section 11, to start in the pathway towards possible acquisition, possible steps and timeline leading up to site development of the use are suggested in table 14.1. We're not saying those are.
Okay, I still feel like there's, this happens and then these things can happen. Whereas other things in that list are not necessarily dependent on the previous thing happening.
I'm going to ask for public comment, since we're talking about the Swaru and Kara's on. You have something to add, Kara, here to our
I do.
deliberation?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. So just a clarification. So the SWARU is the site-wide ready for anticipated reuse, right? Unless I dropped an acronym in there. And what that means is it means construction's complete at the site, right? So all elements of the remedy that need to be constructed are complete, and any institutional controls to be put on the site are in place. So an important nuance to this is that the institutional controls on the site cannot be put in place, the NOLs at least, the notice activity use limitations, until there's a site owner. So we have a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation going on.
You can't
Other-
acquire after a SWARU.
Well,
Sorry, you can't.
Right, you must acquire before the SWARU can be issued. You have to have a site owner.
Kara, can you say it all again? Do it again.
Yes, of course. So the SWARU is multiple parts to it, right? The first kind of big part in EPA's mind, a really big one, is construction complete. So any elements of the remedy have been constructed that need to be built. So for some of these, this is straightforward. For soil, we've done the excavation that needs to be done. We've built the wall and so forth. But then there are other parts, like for groundwater, for example, we know that we're not going to meet the groundwater cleanup levels right away, but the target we really work to is the construction completion. And now we're into the operation and running of the groundwater system. So construction complete is a big target, right? Sorry, question on that part?
Well, I'm just saying, like, it sounds like the construction complete may be the trigger that Pam is looking for.
Construction complete and testing that it's. Yeah, so construction complete includes the
Evaluation of the
the
remedy.
last testing, the final testing. For the soils and the.
Yes, exactly. So it means the remedial action completion reports are done. So for example, for Knox Trail, this is what we just met for Knox Trail, right? We did remedial action complete. And that means that all the remedy has been constructed to that point. We have operated the system for some amount of time. We know that the treatment system is meeting the cleanup goals as intended, but the water that we're extracting from the ground has not yet met those cleanup goals, which is why we're running the groundwater treatment system.
So if we're looking for a trigger point that says that it's okay for the town to acquire at this point, assuming that the negotiations have worked, that is before the SWARU, it would be the issue that the remedial actions are complete.
Correct, right. The construction is complete for the remedial action activities.
and that's
All the
followed by,
remedial actions would be complete.
and then it'd be followed by acquisition and then the SWARU is what you're saying.
Right, because
Yeah.
then the final step, and so some of the institutional controls can be done ahead of time, right, on the non-229 Main Street parcels. So there are some other parcels that will have institutional controls on them. Those can be done ahead of time, but the 2229 parcel cannot be done until the construction is complete and we have a property owner. I'm going to add one more asterisk to this. EPA does have methods of putting institutional controls on properties if there are no owners, but they tend to be under like the deed restriction category, which are essentially less robust and less enforceable. And so they're not the preference, right? The agency greatly prefers to do NOLs, notice of activity use limitations, with Mass DEP, because that is an enforceable document that essentially has, teeth in it. As where a deed restriction is really just a notice on the deed that says this is what's present at the site. Right.
And the null is something that's signed by a property owner as well?
Yeah,
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
the SWARU is not signed by the property owner, right? That's
No,
issued by EPA.
Correct. The SWAR is just I don't want to call it internal document, but it's more or less an internal document to EPA to say we have met construction complete, we've done the ICs on the site, and now we're kind of moving forward. It's a tracking criteria
So-
kind of used.
So there are 5 remedial actions on the site, right? 5 different remedial actions that have to be complete.
Bedrock groundwater, overburden groundwater, off property, holding basin, soil. Yeah, I think 5. That sounds right. I'm counting on my fingers to make sure. But yes, I believe it's 5.
So do we mention the Swarrow at all in this? With,
I think
I
we
think
just
so.
use the caveats and say, you know, roughly 2029, 2030. And, you know, we can
Well, we
make a
can't-
note.
We can't actually start doing anything with the site. We can't, so between 19 and 20 comes the Swarrow. And the thing that we replace the 18 with is that the remedial actions are complete.
what is the document that is issued that says remedial action is complete, Karen?
It's the remedial action completion reports.
Paul,
That's
I'm,
the name of it.
Paul, I'm signing off, okay?
Okay, thank
thanks.
you, ma'am.
Good work, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
But, I
Thank
mean, for
you.
the purpose of this document, I think we'd say remedial actions complete, I mean,
Remedial action completion report. This, I mean,
well,
Reports.
the report's
It's 5 different-
bureaucratic term. The,
yeah, but I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna want something in writing
right,
that says
yeah,
the
yeah,
remedial action, the soils,
Right.
holding basin.
right,
Yeah, is complete.
And those items go out for public review, right?
Correct. Yep. I mean, they go out for
So
public
we'll
review.
have a meeting for each one of them that, or maybe several of them at once that discuss
So
that.
we will have, I mean, we have kind of technical meetings on them. There's no requirement for public meeting on them.
But there will be public comment period on them.
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there'll be the public comment in the sense when we send it to 229 Main Street Oversight Committee to crew,
Mhm.
we'll have that comment, but it's not like when you do a ROD and you have to have public hearing and comments
Okay.
per statute.
And Kara, is the reason why the Swarrow isn't issued until there's an owner? Because the owner has to sign the null to manage the ICs? Is that the main reason?
Correct. Right. That's often that last piece is getting the ICs done.
I
On
mean,
the
the
site.
IC is part of ensuring that the
Right, got it.
protection is in place, right?
Yeah, learn something every day. Okay. Well, this section, this definitely needs some work and the timeline needs some work. So we'll have to go through another iteration before we, before we review it again. Anything else we wanna, I'm glad we talked about, we're not done with this yet, we need another. If you can send me the notes or.
Yeah, I'll
check
check.
me through there. This is very, very helpful. What other section of the report, can we go, I wanna go to another half hour here, because we have.
I would be interested in talking about the risk communication plan. I also wanted to clarify, so if we come up with changes to things, those get sent to you and you make those changes. You own the document right now,
I'm
right?
the doc, I've been
Absolutely.
making the changes that, that have come in.
Okay, and is that true for the appendices now that I gave you that you
I
sent out, or you
haven't
want me to
touched-
do that?
You do that, you're managing the appendices.
Okay.
I've delegated that, yeah, that's great, so anything that needs to go into the appendix. Appendices, less is more, remember that goes to Pam. I will be drafting the executive summary at some point here. When we get all the stuff together, that's probably the last piece, you will all get to review that through. So I'm making the changes in red line. This version here, after we're done with this meeting, I will accept the changes that are in red line here. Which is, you got a clean copy in front of you, so it'll be this document, and then any subsequent comments and changes, I'll be making red line on this document. I'm sure you'll have additional comments, but for this meeting, maybe I'll take this off the screen. I know Pam and David wanted to discuss the risk communication. There was an offline conversation about this, and I thought it would be helpful, David and Pam, if we had an open discussion on just what should be in that section.
Is David the only person on Zoom right now?
There's
The
probably
only committee member on Zoom right now?
the only other committee member, yeah, Pam's not on, Kurt's not on, yeah. How do we want to start the conversation? Perfect, besides Pam and David, were there any other, I reviewed the risk communication plan. Pam reviewed the Pam bill. Changes were made on that, so this is not the original version that you have here. Those have had comments from both me and Pam, they haven't, Pam Rockwell has had some major comments which have not been incorporated, which I wanted to discuss tonight, but does anybody else have any thoughts, comments on the risk communication plan before we?
Have people had a chance to actually look at it?
Yeah, I did, I thought it was pretty good.
Everybody, you've had this document, everybody should have a chance to look at it. I know you don't, but you should, so.
Paul, are you calling on me? My signal's been broken up all evening and it's been difficult to follow along. I couldn't quite tell where the conversation with the risk communication plan is you want to go. What do you want to do?
Well, I was trying to decide how to go with this. I was before, so Pam had comments that, you know, we want to discuss here, but before our comments were aired, I want to make sure that we had if anybody else had comments.
Yeah.
Because I would expect the other comments to be fairly minor. I want to just give the history of the chapter, which has been revised based on comments from Pam Hill and Paul Bone. So, okay. Let me give the floor to Pam Rockwell.
So I had issues with this, that I thought it was, that this was yet again a plan to come up with a plan as opposed to an actual way to step forward immediately and start doing this communication. And that it was a little condescending for the number of people that are actually, that are like environmentalists and the people that have been involved in identifying who the audience is. And that it doesn't actually do enough risk communication within the section, because I think that our biggest risk communication target is actually the select board, and we want to take the opportunity to actually say some of these things that we want in more detail about the messaging. And so I wrote basically an annex to this that is basically, I called it adapting the risk communication plan for Concord. And I actually sent that to David and to Paul, who basically kind of rejected the need for it at all. As I find this one kind of condescending towards environmentalists and all the people who have genuinely raised concerns about the site, and no technical terms because they're often professionals at what they do when they're doing it. David found my plan condescending because it acted as though I was oversimplifying and advocating and not meeting people in their position. So I would actually like to share what I think would make a fine appendix to go with this, or maybe we should consider.
A little color commentary on this. I would say, I thought what was in this plan was adequate for laying out the elements of the plan. I didn't expect we'd have a very detailed plan to this. There'd have to be some planning step that the select board would initiate, and some entity would create this detail. I didn't think that we need to create the level of detail kind of that you were talking about in our plan here. That's why, you know, I didn't reject it, but that's why I thought this was adequate. But notwithstanding the condescending
Well, we
commentary.
both think it's condescending the other, and it may be that's true.
I wasn't
so.
sure it was condescending.
Okay.
But anyway,
But in other words, I'd actually like to share it before we kind of just brush off what I'm talking about. And I want to point out that when we did the reuse, we talked about this same thing, because and literally I went and cut and paste from a document that I wrote for that didn't make it into that report either. And I think one of the reasons that we have a select board that's coming back to us again to come up with help making a decision instead of just making a decision, maybe that they need the context right now. So,
would your piece suffice as an annex or an appendix
yeah,
to this?
yeah.
So it wouldn't be revising this, it would just be we haven't seen it yet, so.
That's what I wanna know, is, so you wanna hang something onto this, not go back and edit this at all?
Well, just clarifying.
Is that correct?
That's what I'm thinking of, rather than, well, I mean, so there are specifics in this one that I actually reused in the annex, in the appendix, but. Yes, I'm thinking that I wanna add mine onto this. This is a textbook, this is how you do a risk communication plan, and mine is more like the IC plan, where I'm coming up with a straw poll for, here's specific stuff to how we fit that into Concord's meeting schedule and how we fit that, and the kind of messaging that we need for particular things that people know about this site already or are concerned about.
Well, if you brought hard copies.
I did.
Pass them out. And then we'll know what we're talking about. Right now, it's hard for me to get.
Right,
And David, you have, this is the same exact thing as what I sent you, so if you can see that, or do you need me to send it to you again, or?
I mean, realistically, this is the 6 or 7 page document, I mean, we can't read this, review it.
Okay.
And comment on the content.
And the parts that are
This-
highlighted are actually things that I cut out of, that I used from David, quoting David's section, because I
I think the
thought they were well
appropriate thing
written.
Probably things that have this as an agenda item, this for the next
Right,
meeting.
for the next meeting.
Okay.
Next meeting, and,
That'll give us a chance to read it more
but
carefully.
I just, I
Let
want
you
to
know what
I want to be clear on, so the proposal here is to have this as an annex, David's chapter would refer to this in some manner, to connect the two pieces.
Right, but like with a sentence that said, detail a perspective plan might be, or a more.
And David, what's your sense on the overall concept here?
I have to say that I've been catching every third word. So I really can't make sense of this. I can comment on what Pam's comments were to me. And I guess she wants to add stuff that she has done in the past and wanted recognition and specifying that some of the people who have been involved in the program work in the past be cited as risk communicators. I think the general plan that I have proposed allows for all of that. So if what you're talking about is adding detail, I have no problem. The one thing that came up in Pam's comments that I've heard scattered here and that Pam Hill also commented on was whether this is condescending towards environmentalists. I have to push back on this. Risk communication is not just educating people and not just talking to people. It's understanding where your relationship challenges are and taking steps to deal with them directly. And it requires understanding the nature of those relationship challenges. There are unquestionably people in town, we've heard from them, we've heard from all of them, who, while they have thoughtful comments, their comments are informed by their sense of, how shall I put this directly, their sense of these issues through the groups that they belong to. Those are filters that we all use. It's not meant to be condescending. In fact, quite specifically, I believe my language, and I haven't gone back to it, I believe my language says it needs to be understood and respected. But it needs to be confronted. It needs to be dealt with. There are people in this town who will see chemicals and Superfund and nuclear and radiation and have for the last 20 years through those lenses. And no risk communication plan, in my experience in 20 years of teaching it and doing it, can succeed, or I'm sorry, succeed's the wrong word, can be more productive in managing relationships if it fails to recognize the roots of why there are some relationships that are problematic. And I will stand by that, and you guys can do with that what you will. My recommendation to the select board, if I were not a part of this task force and they came to me for advice, would be to say the same thing. That there are people in town who see this through those lenses that needs to be understood, that needs to be respected. Those relationships need to be worked on the most. And they also need to be thought of in political terms strategically. Like, how do you want to deal with those versus if there's like 90% of the town says, yeah, let's do this, and 10% says, yeah, let's do that. How do they want to deal with that politically? That needs to be an active part of what the select board recognizes as a challenge for risk communication. As far as the other stuff that Pam wanted to do, I have no problem with it. It fits into the general plan that I proposed, which I think you said, Paul, is a general plan without a lot of the details, which is, I thought, in 6 or 7 pages, what I was supposed to provide.
So,
If I might.
And forgive me for
I
not being able to hear
believe
this. I don't know why my signal sucks tonight.
If
It's
we want to indeed.
been very
show
frustrating.
respect
Can you hear Court now?
If we are trying to show respect for the environmentalist audience, I would strongly urge us not to make claims about why they misunderstand things. And why, this notion that they quote cling to existing beliefs. I don't think that's a way to bring people along. Also, if we're gonna characterize one segment of the town, why did we choose environmentalists? Where are people who are concerned about property values? Where are young parents? Where are people who are ill today? These are all subgroups too, that,
okay, so,
and so I really think we're making a misstep here with these characterizations. I call these characterizations, and I don't think it serves us well.
I wanna say that, so David is an expert on risk communication, and this is what works in other places. And my, I do think maybe it should be toned down a little bit, but my section was basically written, targeted for Concordians who make up kind of a different, you know, most of our environmentalists are environmental engineers. They make money doing this, and they, like Paul, they are happy to, you know, have something cleaned up. And, you know, reaching out to them, they may be misinformed because they were worried before. But I also want to point out, when we, in 2018, we actually had a town meeting. We spent allocated $25,000 for the reuse committee, right? There were 550 some people there at that meeting, and 3 of them voted not to spend the money on that. I mean, it was like, it really was not a lot of people that we're talking about, David. The people that we're talking about having to feel good about this are all on the select board right now. So I really do feel like taking a chance here and doing a little risk communication targeted at dealing with the history and dealing with the concerns of the people that are right there is valuable. And if you don't have a problem with my thing being an annex to an appendix, another appendix, as being here's to specifically adapt traditional risk communication to this particular thing, then what I would really like from this committee here is to look through the task forces to make sure that I haven't sent, if David found this condescending or pushing in one direction or something, that it's inappropriate. And I really would like Pam Hill to also look through it and make sure that it doesn't say anything.
Okay, the two things, I heard David not objecting to adding this as an annex and linking it. I hear in this room that people have comments on this chapter, that you really haven't paid attention to this chapter. So I think we all need to look at this chapter and provide comments that I can edit this, so I can bring a red line version to the next, and so we can have a fuller discussion about minor comments and major comments.
I mean, I just want to say, I called out that cultural identification as an environmentalist in my first set of comments on this chapter, and so somehow it got
Yeah, I don't know
lost.
where they
It
A
got lost.
number of us too.
It got lost, so, you know.
Yeah, our process has changed a little bit, so I may have missed stuff that went to Chris and
Right,
but yeah, let's, and this goes through this whole report.
Right.
This report isn't final. Even though, you know, if I provide comment, take a look at everything in the report again and provide comments once again. You're not gonna have endless opportunities to do this, because at some point we're gonna have to say, we're done. But we're far from that right now. And if I have to ask for another extension beyond mid-December, I will, although it's gonna be hard for the select board to really, it's hard for us to push out the select board to get going early in 2025 if we don't have the report done.
I mean,
I think they're gonna want the report for the end of the year.
is it possible, as we produce subsequent iterations of this, to produce red line iterations so we could actually see the changes? Cause
I sent the red line
Okay.
for this.
For this.
For
Okay.
this.
Yeah, the electronic version I have is
With
red.
red line.
Yeah.
And does it
I've
have
got it right.
their comments?
Okay,
Every,
okay,
whatever comments I received after the last meeting are in red line, and they sent you a
okay,
clean
it's more
version.
helpful, it's more helpful than. looking
Yeah.
at this.
Chris printed out the clean version.
Yeah, I would stop printing out, I would just keep sending out red lines because that's what we can see what changes.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to waste a lot of paper. I think it's-
So the other thing that isn't in either mine or David's right now is that it says we're gonna have a media contact plan or something like that in the charge.
Tell me again, media
So
contact.
what is it? Let me see if I can find this. Actually,
Excuse me, can I interrupt on that particular one? I haven't heard much of this. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah.
So in point number 6 of duties and responsibilities, develop a risk education and communication effort focused on the public, including organizing site visits, hosting public forums about risk, co-hosting EPA meetings about progress at the site, and written reports. Develop and recommend a protocol for media contacts regarding issues at 2229 Main Street.
Okay,
That was, we haven't done it all.
I'm gonna make a comment from the chair. We don't have to nail every piece of the charge. Risk communication plan, we can fashion, you know, as we see fit. It may not have all those pieces. What I want to say about the risk communication plan, and don't take this the wrong way, although it may not be possible not to. I don't want this to be overblown. I want this to be, you know, sensible, because what's gonna happen here is that this isn't the group that's gonna plan this, right? They're gonna take our advice, take David's advice, and then some entity is gonna actually put that into play. We don't have to design this to put it into play. So let's get the concept out there, let's get all the pieces out there. And there's concern out there, but I don't wanna overblow the concern. I think there's more positive energy at the side. We're gonna have to address the people who have concerns, but this shouldn't be a major part of this report. We have, I think, the timelines and the legal part and the reuse are, you know, as important. And I don't want this section to be overly detailed in that respect. So now having said that, let's proceed. Please get the comments on this chapter. We'll put this on the agenda.
Can we send out the appendix too? The draft that I wrote?
Yeah.
You just-
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just gave paper out, but I will give you, I'll send out
Yeah,
something you can read.
Yeah.
Send it out too. I mean, thanks, Pam and David, thanks for your patience on this. We want to get this right in. So, risk communication plan. We're going to have to spend probably the next couple of meetings getting this in good shape. I'm just projecting, I'm not concluding this meeting, but I'm just. So our next meeting is scheduled for the 29th, and then afterwards is November 12th. I want to talk about the 29th meeting. So by November 12th, if we're gonna produce this report by the end of the year, we'll probably have to come close to having a final version of this report. Now, we can vote on the next meeting after that, the end of November. But if we have to put this into production with, you know, with a vendor to actually produce a report, we're gonna have to get that in motion by mid-November. So I think we have 2 more meetings to kind of get it. Now, if we can't do it, we can't do it, then we'll just, we'll ask for another extension, but, you know, just hopefully we can do this in 2 more meetings, but it's gonna require everybody to actually look at these. Look at these chapters, because they're in pretty good shape right now. They're not final, but they're in pretty good shape. They've gone through, every chapter's gone through several iterations. And, yeah. What else? We have 10 more minutes before, we can go on, but I'd like to adjourn by 9.
I've got a couple of comments, but,
On what?
one's on the, this is, human health and safety analysis.
Are they comments that you can send to me?
They are, but it's a. So we have the reuse plan map has an area of it, area C, that is identified as conservation. But when the health and humans, when the risk assessment was done, it treated a big portion of those areas, which they call area 2 on their map, as residential. And technically they are residential, but
Let's go back, this is
So-
well known by this committee that because of the conservative nature, they're going to treat that with residential exposures, even though nobody's gonna live there. But by putting residential exposures, it makes the incidental habitation very conservative.
you
So-
change the numbers from, you move the number from one to another here, and it implies that it's only good for conservation.
Or just need, as I said, I think it needs some text explaining why this map is different than the previous map.
I don't-
that happened later.
Yeah,
I don't have a comment on how the risk assessment was done, but a related comment on the communication to the public about the numbering. It's very confusing that we have one set of reuse zones labeled
Right.
based on our master plan, and that the health risk assessment has used a different numbering system. So I would recommend, and
you did make that comment,
Right, yeah.
and I thought I made the.
You made a change, and it now says that 2 is only good in your version of it, that basically 2 is only good for,
well,
was evaluated for conservation use, and it was not, it's safe enough to live on. And I would not, I would just add another comment about the changes and put it back so that it matches the actual human health risk assessment that is.
I would just, for communication clarity, I actually think it's fine the way that they've done the health risk assessment and,
Right.
clarifying, communicating why they chose to use that, that methodology, I think is fine. But I would recommend that we call these, reuse zones A, B, C, and D rather than 1, 2, 3, and 4, something, some way to distinguish the health risk assessment zones.
No, but what I'm saying is that in order to call it only conservation land, you change the language, which I have on page 26 of my version, I didn't look it up in the new version. You change the number from being, the number area 2 from being included in the residential area to being included in the conservation area, and it's not, it was evaluated as a residential area.
So you're saying that the map is actually wrong?
No, the map is right, the paragraph before the map has 2. It
Area
says,
2.
areas 1A, 1B would also, and would also be recreating at site areas 2, 4, and 5. The HRA assumed that residents would be living at areas 1A, 1B, and area 2, and recreating at the other areas.
Can you make this a?
I can make a red line on that.
Make the red lines that you think are
Yeah.
clarifying, because my clarifying.
Because all you did was move the 2 from,
Okay,
you made a change that I think ought to be undone, so.
undo it,
Okay.
make it clear.
Is,
And I do think that we should talk about the difference. somewhere.
Yeah.
is there a way to come up with a different symbology or something so that it's not like, what do you mean? I thought this was zone 2A,
Do you want me to redline what I think of? Do that. Okay.
Red line in the health risk chapter.
I will redline it in the whole doc you sent me, because that's the
Yeah.
latest thing I have, right?
You're not gonna change, okay, remember you have, the room report is in the appendix, so.
I'm
You
not gonna
can't really
change the
change
rule
this
report.
map, it's
I'm
from the
not-
Google report.
I'm not changing the map is actually right. It's the paragraph before describing that.
And similarly, in the introduction, when, you know, I asked for this, but, you know, you added in. The present state of the site is depicted in the aerial photo. Among the features shown are, you define the holding basin, the cooling ponds, fagging boat. But there are numbers with them. I would just get rid of the numbers,
Yeah.
just have bullets. Because again, we've introduced.
Okay, so I had a
Oh, I see.
paragraph
You mean this?
that you edited, that Paul decided was inappropriate and crossed it out.
I'm
Can we put
fine
the
with-
can we put the paragraph back?
Put it back.
Okay,
You know. whatever.
so I'll do that.
Put it back, you're wearing me down.
You're wearing you down. I also had a paragraph
There's
earlier
so
that
much rhythm
described,
floating from my head.
I mean, I also had a paragraph earlier that described the actual, you know, what had happened at the site to describe that you
I don't wanna,
changed the grammar on, but Paul cut it out, so.
I don't want additional detail that
Yeah.
you can refer to.
But I did want it in there, and I would like to discuss it at some point.
I'm fine with the way the report reads now, except for I wouldn't add the numbers and I would try and distinguish. The only other thing that I had that I think, you know, while we're a group rather than individual edits is, you know, Carl and I have used these same scenario in Rich. We, you know, in chapter 6 and chapter 7, we used these set of 3 scenarios. And we agreed on the scenarios, you ran numbers on them, we had ordered them in a certain way, and you don't like the ordering. I don't mind the ordering, but
Yeah,
it's
change
linked, it's in chapter 6, it's in chapter 7, table 7.1 and 7.2, so they just need to be
Yeah.
consistent.
What I did is you had, number 1 was private development, I flipped that into municipal development, because that's,
Okay,
yeah, we're basically recommending the town acquire the site, so I had private first, I just flipped them.
good, we just have to make sure it's consistent.
Exactly.
You know,
I understand.
like,
And it's-
I made one change, I didn't make the others, because I ran out of gas.
Yeah, but
Got you.
it's,
I knew you were gonna bring
Okay,
that
that's
up.
good, I haven't even looked at my chapter, because in terms of priorities.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's at the bottom of.
It doesn't, I flipped it, I didn't change it,
I don't
Flip
think
it
you
over.
changed the wording,
I didn't change anything, I just flipped the
Yeah.
table.
Make scenario 3, 1, and then, yeah. Okay.
Okay, could we talk, I have a conflict with the next meeting, which is on the 29th, and I think we do have, I was thinking maybe we could punt on the meeting, but I do think we have to continue on this report. Are there any other days during that week where we could have a 7 PM meeting? I mean, there was an option to do a morning meeting, but then the early morning didn't work out for Gary, it was a late morning, it's not, you know, I think the early, I'd rather see if we can have another day that week rather than Tuesday that would fit people's schedules at 7 PM. Now granted, we have several people who aren't on the call here, I don't know if David's still with us.
And I don't have my date book, so I can't commit either.
I'll make it work, so.
I'm sorry,
I said I don't have my calendar with me, so I can't commit to another. I may be available, but I just don't know. I mean, I know I'm available some of that week, but
This is the last week of October, right?
Yeah,
So I'm not available Monday night.
so Wednesday.
We're not gonna do it on Halloween,
yeah.
so that
Halloween
pretty
is
much
also-
week Wednesday.
Oh, it's Thursday, that's out. So I'm looking at Wednesday. Can you-
summon mutants from the Sphagnum Bog.
Is there anybody here that knows they can't do Wednesday night?
I know
The 30th.
Pam teaches Wednesdays, I don't know how late she teaches.
Piece of evening,
I think Wednesday night's okay.
Okay for me. I can do it.
okay, I'll poll everybody, and I assume Chris, we can find a location for it. If we, Wednesday night, the 30th, at 7 PM.
Is it Wednesday the 30th of that?
Well, I'm not changing anything yet, but I'm just kind of Wednesday the 30th, at 7 PM.
So Pam may have a conflict on Wednesday and Pam may have a conflict on Monday, or you do.
I definitely have conflict with them.
But either of those nights work for me, but yeah.
The following one I'll have trouble with.
The following one is when? That's November 12th or so?
Well, yeah, I'd like to, there's editing and there's commenting and, I can largely handle that as long as I keep my wits about me, but I mean, these larger discussions about. You know, the risk communication chapter, are a big thing I want to discuss as a group, so maybe as we get further into this. We will have lesser need for group discussions, other than the final review and final discussion of the report.
I think I'm out of town that week also.
But it'd be good to
You're
get,
in town?
I'm out of town, out of the country, November 11 to.
Oh,
well, when's the executive summary draft? When do you plan to have the executive summary draft? Because that seems like that's where it's spending
Yeah.
a fair amount of time, I think.
Yeah, do you have it drafted by the 29th or?
oh, yeah.
So the 12th, we should probably finalize that, yeah. Or try.
It's gonna be short. Relatively short, but. It'll kind of look like the set of slides, all I want to use, I mean, it's gonna be a high level. I'll excerpt pieces
Yeah.
we've got from each piece. Okay, I think that's what we had on the agenda for tonight. Just to recap, section 13, major thing for next week, I need get your comments in on the rest of it. If you can send me the red lines on 14, we can get that changed. One good news is nobody's talking about the legal chapter anymore.
I had only one comment there. The statement that the town's liability changes dramatically if we acquire it. Well, I mean, it could change dramatically if we don't acquire it in the smart way. But I don't know, that just struck me as a trigger word. And I would have preferred significantly or something like that.
If somebody changed the word on that.
I think
Sorry to be picky, but
legal can live with that. Again, our thinking was, look, not
Oh, great.
underplay. and-
yeah, no, I
But
understand.
that's an overplay to your point, yeah.
Yeah, it's still in there dramatically. I've changed it and I reverted, because I think the next sentence in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
However, to mitigate these liabilities, the town will seek rights from liability protections. It could change, if nothing were done, and you acquired the site without liability protections. Not that you would, it would change
It
dramatically.
would change.
yeah, I mean,
It says could change.
the sense of the paragraph is fine, I'm just, that's a word that I think is. You know, I am worried in the long run that we have rightly stated all the contingencies and all the concerns. And if I came into this cold, I'd say, why are we bothering? To acquire, we're gonna spend money on lawyers. And I just, I want us to come across as saying, yeah, this has a lot of contingencies, but it's worth doing, and we think it'll be safe if they do what they said. And that's the bottom line.
I mean,
I'm not gonna arm wrestle.
Overall, the report, I think, has that
Yeah,
positive.
it does.
We're not overselling, and we're not raising red flags, other than little red flags, You gotta make sure you
And we're not minimizing.
So
get.
there's, there's one part of the legal section that I'm still
Page
This-
21.
21, so this is the liability insurance, and maybe this is supposed to be in section 7. But we talked to Chris about tort protection last time, and you were gonna write something?
Yeah, I'm writing that.
Okay, because I think that that's an important thing, that is a concern expressed that we've come up with a solution for, and we want to explain it here somewhere. And whether it's there or in section 7, that we explain how you would negotiate both at purchase of insurance and when an event happened, to be sure that we are protected for,
So Chris, you wrote me a section,
Yeah, I owe you a memo, but I'm working on it, I'll have that done by the.
are you gonna have that done before my executive summary? Is it a raise to the bottom? Oh, I have a solution for your concern about dramatically, I just looked at it. So the sentence reading, this will be the last thing. It says, upon acquisition, blah, 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 the town's liability exposure could change dramatically. I would just add two words, without liability protections, comma, upon acquisition, to change dramatically.
Fine, with me.
That's fine.
In other words, remove,
Yeah,
Yeah,
just add it, 'cause-
agreed,
yeah.
it does change.
It would change dramatically. It's not
yeah,
current.
without liability,
Right.
and that's what the next sentence goes, the modified, but we should pull it up front. Does the legal team agree?
Yes.
Outstanding. Any public comments? I don't know if anybody's left on here.
No public.
More the public out.
It's freezing in here. Okay, let me know about the 30th, please. Everybody, and I'll send out a note reminding you about that, so we'll get that scheduled, and I think we have the agenda. Thank you. We have a vote, and prepare slides for the select board. I will revise those and send those back out
Do you want
to you.
us to be there
But
Monday
but I
night?
have, the meeting packet is due Thursday, yeah. I got sort of like 24 hours to change, revise it, and I will. Do I want you to be there? Sure, be great for everybody there, if you can make it, it's great.
Where in the agenda are you?
I'm on the agenda.
You know when you'll come up?
I don't,
They're gonna finalize it tomorrow.
let's take a look tomorrow. I think Mary's giving the thing a half hour, which will be mostly questioned, but we'll see.
So what's printed out here that we're using for an example is the accepted version that was sent out by you of the whole document, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can work from that to give you comments.
Yeah, you also have electronically complete version.
Right, electronically,
Yeah,
Electronically, he emailed around,
yeah, so.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.